To invite the two of us up there for Christmas. Kaylee had a really small family, so apparently it would be just the two of us, her brother, and her parents. Pulling up to the house was a pleasant surprise. The house was beautiful, and it stood on a huge, well-kept property secluded from any other houses. As Kaylee and I got out of my truck, her parents came out to the porch to greet us. First impressions, they seemed friendly and weird. An unexplainable type of friendly. The father didn't smile, but he shook my hand, patted me on the back, and said it was great to meet me. The mother hugged me, showing a lot more emotion, but something about her face was a bit off-putting. She had a really wide smile that seemed a bit exaggerated. The house was as beautiful inside as it was outside. It had a wooden lodge type atmosphere to it. A little while later, I met Katie's brother Paul, who got home from work. He was a really socially awkward dude. He had a bowl cut and had a whole tattoo sleeve running up his arm. We had dinner, which was awkward at certain moments, but other than that, it was kind of normal. After dinner, we watched a Christmas movie in the living room. I tried not to make eye contact, but I could tell Paul kept looking at me for extended periods of time, on a few different occasions. At one point, I finally looked back at him, and we locked eyes for like 3 seconds before he turned back to the TV. He was giving me the most judgmental stare I'd ever seen, and it made me only more uncomfortable. At the end of the night, Kaylee and I were in the guest room, which had an attached bathroom. Kaylee was in the bathroom. She left her phone on the nightstand. I saw she got a text from her mom, and for some reason, feeling a bit sneaky, I got up to read it. It was not at all what I was expecting, and it changed the whole night completely. Briefly on the screen, it said, "Text from mom, do you think he suspects anything yet?" But the message quickly switched to new message, I'm guessing because she had iMessage notifications set to hide once the phone locks. I wanted to read what was said before that. Her phone had a password, unfortunately. I could actually feel her heart pumping now. Kaylee came back into the room. I kind of gave her the cold shoulder because my mind was racing. She seemed to notice. She was texting on her phone for a bit before turning out the lamp and going to sleep. I couldn't sleep though. I was rolling around for hours wondering what that text meant, and if it was about me. And what the hell was up with her brother? It was exactly 2 in the morning when I heard Kaylee get out of bed, but she was doing so very quietly. Normally I'd find this to be a kind gesture, but under the circumstances, I was finding this suspicious now. I didn't move. I pretended to still be asleep. I heard her come to my side of the bed and stand there for a few moments, then leaving the room and walking downstairs. Then I heard someone else walking downstairs. And then another person. Something was going on. I went over to the top of the stairs to listen to what was going on downstairs. There was a bunch of talking, but in very low voices. I walked down a few stairs quietly. The talking was coming from the dining room by the stairs. It sounded like they were planning something. I heard Kaylee say something like, "When I go back up, you stand by the door." Then I heard her brother say something, but what was going on was really starting to hit me in the face, or at least what I think was going on. I went back to the room to grab my stuff and leave. As I was grabbing the keys, I noticed something in the corner of the room. I turned the lamp on, which exposed Kaylee's dad sitting in a chair in the corner of the room. blank expression on his face behind his glasses, staring at me. I screamed at least 4 times, "You're all crazy," as I ran to my car. I put the car in drive, practically before the car was even fully on, and floored it out of that long driveway back to the road. I didn't stop once, except for gas. And at that gas stop, I checked my phone and saw Kaylee text me saying, "What the fuck happened?" I didn't respond. Not until later that night when I got home. I said, "I don't know what you and your sick family were planning on doing to me. I don't want to know. Don't ever contact me or come near me again, and I won't report this." I said this only because I knew there was no proof at all of what happened, or what might have been about to happen. I never replied. Christmas Eve night, 1 in the morning. I was in our den watching TV because I always like to stay up extra late on Christmas Eve. To make things more festive and cozy feeling, it was during a snowstorm. I left the window open and the backyard light on just so I could also have the view of the snow in the backyard. I was focused on the TV at the moment, but through my peripheral vision, I thought I could briefly see something in the backyard. I turned to the window, but besides the falling snow, there was nothing going on out there. Still, I got up and went to the window just to be sure. Nothing. I sat back down on the couch, but now I was constantly checking the window to see if anything was outside. About 10 minutes later, I calmed down and forgot about it, and reverted my full attention back to the movie. Then I heard, loud and clear, the backyard gate slam shut. I almost knew someone was back there. I slipped on my shoes and a jacket and went out to the backyard to check it out. There were boot marks in the snow leading from one gate across the yard to the other gate. I was not feeling brave enough to follow them, so I went back inside. As I was taking off my boots and jacket, I saw a track of wet, muddy snow on the damp carpet, leading from the office to the hallway that led to the living room. That was also the way to my parents' room. First, I had to go to the office to see how they broke in, so I followed the boot marks to the office without turning on any lights to make my presence known. I was expecting to see one of the windows busted open, but everything was intact. Then I realized, the boot marks didn't start in this room. They ended in this room. I slowly lifted my head up to the garage door in the corner of the room. It was open. Right under the doorway, there was someone in a winter coat, jeans, and boots, squatting down as if trying to hide, back facing me, his head turned to look at me. I stood there with my mouth open in horror for a few seconds before I ran towards my parents' room, screaming the whole way there. I got my dad to come out as quickly as possible, and on our way to the garage together, we heard the actual garage door open. By the time we got there, the intruder was gone. Realistically, we could have followed his boot marks, but who knows how far he'd gotten by that point. We found out he broke in through an unlocked living room window. Just goes to show if somebody has intentions of breaking into your house, they'll find a way, which is why you should always lock all your doors and windows. Was 11, and my younger brothers were 8 and 7. My parents and their group of friends were part of a club that was basically for rich, snobby people. The club always hosted a Christmas party one night in December each year at the parents' firehouse. Of course, for all the younger kids, like my siblings, somebody would always dress up as Santa Claus and hand out the presents that were left in a sack by a chair, which had a red blanket over it. This year, my dad's best friend Michael was dressing up as Santa. He was sitting at the same table as us, so when the time came for him to change into the Santa suit, I saw him get up and walk out the door. There were like 20 young kids there that never noticed. Everyone was having a good time, chatting and whatnot, the kids playing on the floor in the center of the room. When the doors to the firehouse opened and bells were heard jingling, all the kids jumped up yelling Santa. With a surprisingly unimpressive Santa costume. It honestly looked like the cheapest thing he could find at Party City. A serious downgrade from last year. The hat and beard were alright, but the costume just seemed cheap. Not the usual costume the club supplied. He chuckled and did his best Santa impression. I had to say, he was doing a really good job of changing his voice though. I saw a few of my parents' friends whispering to each other. Michael grabbed the bag of gifts and said in his best Santa voice he'd be right back with the presents. He sounded so different though. He walked out the door with the bag of gifts. That's when my dad and a couple other guys ran after him yelling, "Hey." I still didn't know what was going on. Not until my mom told me that wasn't Michael. I wanted to feel important, I guess, so I ran outside to the parking lot as well, where I found my dad and two other guys standing there, looking around dumbfounded. The man dressed as Santa was gone. The real thing they were concerned about was where Michael was. Michael's car was also missing. I asked them if they were sure that wasn't Michael. They were all positive though. We tried calling Michael, but his phone was off. We tried his house phone after a while too, which went to voicemail. We had to send a search party, but we couldn't find him anywhere though. Eventually my dad and I returned to the firehouse to pick up my mom and siblings. Just about everyone went home by then. I waited outside. I heard a scream for help in the distance. It came from the woods, deep in the woods. I ran to the tree line to scream back Michael's name. He yelled back help again. It was him. I was too excited to go back for my dad, so I ran into the woods following his screams for help, and I found him, tied to a tree in a bloody mess. Blood was dripping from his forehead down to his face. He looked like he'd been beaten by a blunt object. I cut the little rope with my key, and he struggled to his feet. I walked him back to the parking lot, and he screamed when he saw his car was gone. When Michael left the building planning to get changed into the Santa costume, he was jumped by 3 guys wearing masks, one of whom struck him in the forehead with something metal repeatedly until he was knocked out. Next thing he knew, he woke up tied to a tree in the woods. It's sick to think that 3 or 4 men could have set up a plan like this, involving harming somebody just to steal a bunch of gifts from children, some of them pretty expensive. And to add insult to injury, they stole Michael's $50,000 car. I felt terrible for him, and I still do. It's not the kind of story that he can just bring up for fun. It's still a painful story to tell, even for me.
It was July 4th, 2007. I was 16 years old, and I had nothing to do for the night. My older sister Alicia, who has 9 years on me, was going to some huge party upstate. I think it was referred to as the Rockaway Bomb Show, where a bunch of young, out-of-college adults would go to drink and go crazy. Surprisingly, when I told my sister that I had no plans, she invited me to come with her and her boyfriend Alex. Now, I was a shy kid, so maybe that's why she was inviting me, to help me break out of my shell. But being 16 years old, it was definitely out of my comfort zone to go attend some crazy drinking party full of 20-year-olds. Somehow though, she guilted me into going. We'd have to stay at a motel overnight there, so I packed my stuff, and within 2 hours, Alicia was honking the horn outside. It was a long drive, close to 4 hours. By the time we arrived, the sky was already turning that bright orange as the sun was setting. We pulled into some sketchy looking road with a sign that said "Fireworks Show this way." I rolled down the window and already heard a huge crowd of people in the distance. As we passed the tree lines on either side into the clearing, we could see a transportable stage, a bunch of tables scattered everywhere, and a food and drink bar. People in their low 20s everywhere, all holding beers or other alcoholic beverages. I felt my heart sink a little in social nervousness. Alicia parked the car on the grass, because really there was no parking lot, and the parking was basically I followed Alicia and Alex to the party, and they immediately, coincidentally, found some of their friends who already seemed drunk. They introduced me and we chatted for a bit. Alicia handed me a beer, which I nervously accepted. As soon as I took the first sip, I started getting weird stares from people. I was afraid someone would ask me how old I am. I continued to cling on to Alicia and Alex for another 15 minutes before they both split up and started talking to random people. At that moment, I felt alone and awkward. In the middle of hundreds of college students and graduates all conversing with each other, and here I was, an awkward middle school-looking 16-year-old with a beer in his hands all alone. A hand grabbed my shoulder and I turned, thinking it was Alex or Alicia, but it was rather some older guy. I mean, like, out of place old. The guy was like in his 40s or 50s, he had a balding head and glasses, he looked like he could be a creepy priest. He then took the beer out of my hand and said, "How old are you?" That hit me hard in the stomach as I choked up for words. I was actually just getting that from my sister. He put the beer on a nearby table and asked me what my name is. I, still thinking this guy was a worker at the show or something, told him Jake. Then he asked me who I'm here with, and I responded, "My sister, like I just told you." Eventually, I talked my way away from the guy and looked for Alicia or Alex. There were so many people here though, and I didn't have a cell phone back then, so I couldn't even text or call them. It got to a point where I felt so alone and awkward that I wandered away from the party and into the woods. I sat on a log reflecting on myself and regretting my decision to come when all of a sudden I heard a huge boom followed by a roar of cheering. The fireworks show had started. I could actually see perfectly fine from where I was sitting, so I decided I'd just stay there. My mind was sucked into the beauty of the fireworks blowing up in the sky. So much so that I forgot about how upset I was. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. Something was wrapped around my mouth and nose. I struggled. I tried to scream and break free. I felt like I was becoming lightheaded. I looked up for anything on the ground to use as a weapon and pulled up a big stick. I tried swinging at the person's leg, but it didn't work. The person pulled me down to the ground and pinned me on my stomach. As a final attempt, I grabbed a big stone from in front of me, and with a single, lucky swing, I struck the person straight in the face. They let loose their grip and let out a grunt, giving me enough time to get up and run. I did take one glance at the person, however, and could see that they were wearing the same thing that the man I saw earlier had been. I ran back to the party where they were shooting off the fireworks and asked the apparent hosts of the party if they knew the man. They said they hadn't. I told them what happened, and one of the guys was like, "Holy shit, buddy, yeah, we're gonna report this." By the end of the night, when my sister and her boyfriend were too drunk to drive, I ended up driving to the motel. I never told anyone in my family about the incident out of embarrassment, but that's something I kind of regret now. My name is Ivan, I'm 15 years old, and this is the scariest experience of my life. So it's the 4th of July, 2015. I live in a calm suburban neighborhood that's usually very quiet, but one night it all changed. My dad had to work extra late since he was covering someone's shift, and my mom was at some friend's house party. This was a Friday night, so I would usually just play games on my computer and talk with friends, basically having my kind of fun. I would do that every single Friday night without any issues. The time was about 9 or 10 p.m. and I was playing my favorite game, League of Legends, talking with some friends, when suddenly I heard a window shut. Or maybe it was something else. I thought it may be the broken dishwasher we had that sounded very loud. I ignored it and wanted to get back to my game, so I increased the volume of my headset. The sound echoed so loud that I could almost hear it with the volume on 96%.
I had enough and wanted to see what it was. So I reduced the volume and told my friends to hold on and that I would be right back. The sound wasn't from the dishwasher or the dryer. It wasn't a window either. The sound was still underway though when I came to look what it was. The basement. I had never gone in there since we moved in, and my parents told me to never go down there by myself. Not for suspense reasons or anything like that, but they actually just don't want me going down there moving around any boxes. The basement was dirty, and the door was kind of broken and always gave out creepy drafts when it was open. I went to the basement door and listened. The sound went on for a good 2 minutes before it stopped. My whole body was actually filled with joy and happiness. But before I could even breathe out and go to my room calmly, the sound started again. First quietly, and then louder and louder and louder. I was completely home alone if you're wondering. No parents, no pets, no babysitters, nothing. I didn't even have any weapons to defend myself either. I was so scared that I started having thoughts about my entire life, as if it were flashing before my eyes, so completely sure I was going to pass out or even die. Now the sound was very loud. I went straight to my room and closed and locked the door very quietly. I took my phone and dialed my mom's number. She told me to call the police, which suddenly seemed like a better idea. I called the police, and as I was on the line with the operator, I heard a door opening from all the way downstairs. Because it was so loud, I knew that it was the basement door. The operator told me that they would be over as soon as they could. It was at that moment that the horrific truth hit me. Somebody was in my house. I listened in silence for a few minutes, other than the occasional firework booming in the distance from the outside, as I heard somebody rummaging through our kitchen and living room. I wrote to my friends in the chat, "There's a fucking intruder in my house." Before I could even see what they responded with, I heard footsteps coming upstairs. Thinking on my feet, I opened the window and jumped down 2 stories onto the grass, breaking my left ankle. I was crawling as far as I could away from the window, and when I looked up to the window, I saw the most disturbing face which has ever belonged to a man. A crooked mouth, round, wiry hair, and eyes so dark I couldn't even see them. But I could only see it for a few moments before he turned and walked away from the window. The sounds of cop cars stopping nearby was the greatest thing ever at that moment. I remember watching the police walking the man out to the car in cuffs, and I'll never forget that face, which looked even more horrific up close as he gave me an evil, hateful stare before being driven off in the backseat of that police car. It was the 4th of July, 2 days after my birthday. We live in a very quiet town in New Jersey, so not much was going on. I had just turned 21, so my girlfriend, who had already been 21 for a while, jokingly decided to come over to my house with a couple 6-packs and some fireworks for the holiday. My parents were at one of the neighbors' parties far down the road. We don't have a lot of close-by neighbors. My girlfriend's name is Sophia. When she arrived, we headed to the backyard, where we started drinking the 6-packs together. She brought 2 big firework missiles, a couple bottle rockets, and some firecrackers. Obviously the missiles were what caught my eye the most. When I finished my second beer, I got off the deck to shoot off the 2 bottle rockets. Up next were the firecrackers. After lighting up the firecrackers, however, I noticed my garage was open all the way across the road. I told Sophia I'd be right back and walked over to it. I went inside and turned on the light. Every drawer and every closet door had been opened. I called my dad first thing and let him know somebody broke into the garage and possibly robbed us. He had a typical reaction. "Are you serious?" "Oh shit. What did they take?" "I don't know." Alright, hang tight, I'll be in a sec to check it out. So my dad was momentarily leaving the party down the block to go check it out. When I got back to the deck, I told Sophia, and she was just in shock. She went to go look herself, and when she came back, we just sat there outside on the backyard deck, waiting. Eventually, I decided to just shoot off the big missiles anyway.
couldn't wait anymore, and it was July 4th after all. Sophia told me to go for it. The first missile was huge. It practically lit up the whole backyard for a second. I loved it. But I knew these two missiles were not cheap, so I thanked Sophia again. I lit the second missile, and during those initial few seconds, as the fuse was burning, me and Sophia both heard a large branch snapping on the ground from the woods. We both looked in that direction, and as the rocket exploded in the sky, it provided just enough light to see a figure in the woods facing us. We both screamed simultaneously, just in time for my dad to hear it. Me and my dad both chased in that direction into the woods, but we couldn't see or hear anything. We completely lost the person. Later that night, we turned on the security camera in the garage that we hadn't used in a long time. At maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, when I was finally going to bed, I looked out my window for the heck of it, and the garage light was on. Me and my dad went to check it out. This time, the entire garage had been completely trashed, and some of my dad's expensive tools were missing. We went back to the house to check the surveillance footage, and we were disturbed. In the footage, the lights turned on, but the camera was blocked by something. It seemed like a piece of paper. We rushed back to the garage to check it out, and found a simple post-it note taken from the desk in the garage, stamped onto the camera. And in writing on the note were the words, "Happy Independence Day, fuck you." We never found the robber.
Trying the doorknob, trying to bust down the door. These weren't even kids. By some miracle, I came up with an idea. I turned on the receiver to my speaker system, plugged in my iPhone, brought up the music back, played the 25 gunshot sound effect, turned on the volume and pressed play. The sound of the gunshot echoed out in the speakers. It sounded real enough. I paused the video after the first shot and yelled, "That was a warning shot. Leave now or I won't hesitate to shoot you in the head." And it worked. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps stopping over my wood floors and out the front door. I gave it a moment before opening my bedroom door and peeking outside. They were gone. I quickly shut it, called the police, and that's where my story ended.
I do have a little sister who's only 8, so my mom went trick-or-treating with her. Now one really good friend, Steve, already had plans, so it didn't seem like I'd be trying to do it. I felt a funny part of me that started with happiness on the inside, so my mom asked me to stay home and help out here. Now I felt like I had a job. Didn't involve me trick-or-treating. My mom left with my sister at about 6 o'clock, about an hour after she got home from work. She told me to expect her back around 9. So I was relaxing on the couch in the living room, watching a scary movie marathon on AMC, and occasionally and while doing that, the kitchen I remember the room was set so high that it actually made me jump. Sounds you'd expect when somebody says I think I said hello about 5 times before the first one made it over. I just knew it was somebody holding the Halloween prank call. What else could I do but ignore it? That was well enough for the next few minutes to watch the phone rang. Same unknown number made up with the caller ID. I wanted to see what she was doing. This time I could hear a very faint ringing. Alright, I know it's you. pain threat happened again. The sound of that phone ringing had become sickening. For some reason, again and again, I picked up. Once again. Silence. Other than the faint breathing and crumbling of the phone. It was like this for almost half a minute before they suddenly spoke in an exaggerated deep voice. I will be paying for your visit tomorrow. I told them to fuck off and hang up the phone, promising myself not to pick it up again. I'd say about half an hour later, the power in the house was cut. The lights went out. The TV turned off. I stood up and closed my door. One loud and thumping case the front door. I completely lost it, began screaming like a girl, but there was something coming from outside. Laughter. I recognized that laughter. I opened the door, and there he was. Stephen. I shoved him nearly down the steps out of anger. So, that was you who made those dumb phone calls, man. He nodded while laughing. It didn't sound like you on the phone. Let me hear you do that voice again. I thought he was lying at first. But then my heart dropped. I had him follow me to the fuse box outside. Just as I feared, it had been opened and all the wires had been snipped. I think we ran faster than any Olympic champions back into the house. I called my mom, who told us to stay inside and wait for police. She got called. The call was placed to a payphone outside of a nearby bar. I still wonder, was this just a dumb Halloween prank gone too far? Or was it a potential break-in? And God knows what else waiting to happen. I don't think I ever want to find out. When I was a kid, my friends and I were trick-or-treating every year. This one particular Another year, as we were trick-or-treating, we passed a man who stood still with a mask on, holding a lantern. As we walked past him, he turned his whole body around and followed us with his eyes. We were creeped out, but there were plenty of people around, so we made our way to the next house. My friends and I saw him over and over again, as we made our way from house to house, and he seemed to be following us in typical horror story form. We walked so slow, we couldn't figure out how he kept up with us. At one house, when we hadn't seen him for a while, we got our candy. As we turned around to walk back to the street, the masked man stood in the road waiting for us. Immediately, we knocked back on the door and told the owners of the house about it. The masked man continued walking down the street, and we didn't see him again that night. Later on, an adult friend of the family told us he saw a masked man hiding behind a tree, waving little kids over, and he only backed off when he threatened to call the police.
I was trick-or-treating with my friend Casey. We were both 11 years old at the time. We were walking across a small wooden bridge over a small river that many called Jack Winkle River, when a black Jeep pulled up on the other side of the bridge, basically blocking our way. We turned around and hurried away. We were the types of kids to obey the stranger danger rules. We could hear the windows of the Jeep rolling down, and a man with a raspy smoker's voice called for us to come back. He was yelling for help, asking us for directions. I yelled sorry, and we continued to hurry. The Jeep couldn't fit over that small bridge, so it pulled away and drove down the road on the other side. We thought we had made our escape from the creepy driver, when here came an SUV barreling around the corner down the street, slamming on the brakes in front of us. Once again, the driver rolled down the windows. Now with them right next to us, we could see there were two passengers in the car as well. An old guy with gray curly hair and a mustache in the backseat, who also had a raspy smoker's voice, told us to get in the car, that they have free bags of candy. The Jeep banged a three-point turn and tailed us wherever we went. At one point, the Jeep finally accelerated past us, came to a stop, and the back and front passenger side doors opened, and the two creepy men stepped out lunging at us. We dropped our bags of candy and ran straight for my house, which was in sight now. We rang the doorbell desperately at least 20 times. The old men that were chasing us couldn't run fast, and when they saw us running to my house, they turned back. My mom opened the door, and we screamed and pointed at the Jeep that was backing away in the other direction. She shoved us inside and locked the door and called the police like any mom would. She reported the black Jeep with 3 men inside, older looking, raspy voices, and any other descriptions we gave. My mom was freaking out all night, worried about the fact that they knew where we lived now. My dad tried to calm her, but she couldn't calm down. Ultimately, the police agreed to send an unmarked police car to stay out front and keep guard for 3 hours. That made my mom feel a little better, and what made us all feel better was when my dad woke us up to see the flashing red and blue lights outside of the unmarked police car. They had pulled over an SUV, a black Jeep, and 3 men were in cuffs, the 3 old creeps that tried to kidnap me and Casey. My dad went outside to talk to the officer and most likely confirmed that those were the men. Me and Casey went to the doorway and screamed at the men for their attention. They looked, and we both gave them the finger. My mom then pulled us back in and shut the door, sending us to bed. We went from the worst night of both of our lives to ultimately the best night of our lives. This story took place on Halloween night. I took my 7-year-old daughter, Jamie, trick-or-treating for a few hours, and when we got back, I cooked dinner, we watched TV together, and then I sent her to bed. I was feeling especially tired that night, so I brushed up and went to sleep. Shortly after, my daughter entered the room and told me there was someone in her closet. I assured her there was no one in her closet. She asked to sleep with me, but I once again assured her that she was safe in her room. She reluctantly went back to her room and shut the door. I made a mental note that if she came back again, I would walk her to her closet and show her that there's no one in there. Surely enough, 5 minutes later she came back. I asked her why she thought there was someone in her closet. She responded saying she heard someone moving around and things falling over. Honestly, when she said that, it kind of made my heart jump for a second. I walked her to her room and turned on the lights. I jokingly asked, "Is anybody in there?" We stood and listened. I didn't expect to hear anything. There it was, a thud from inside the closet. I screamed at Jamie to run to the neighbors and call the police. As she did, I swung the door open and was shocked to find the neighbor's son, Randy, sitting on top of my daughter's Lego box. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and yanked him up aggressively. I walked him angrily back to his parents' house next door and found Jamie ringing the doorbell. When they answered, I shoved him inside right into his father and explained everything. I told him I wouldn't press charges, but if I ever caught him near my daughter again, they would all be sorry. Randy's dad, Mark, slapped him across the face, then asked me to come inside to allow Randy to explain himself. Me and Jamie both went inside. Apparently, while I was taking Jamie trick-or-treating, he had snuck into our house through an open window and hid in her closet with his friend Daryl. I asked him if this Daryl kid was still in my house. He said yes. I told Jamie to wait with Mark while I ran back into my house. Right as I entered, there he was. This Daryl kid, uglier and shadier looking than Randy. He had my daughter's underwear in his hand. What I did next was completely out of fatherly protective anger. I grabbed the little shit by the throat and threw him to the floor, slapping him 4 times in the face, then hesitantly allowing him to get up and leave. The only reason I didn't call the police was because of my close friendship with Mark. But I made my point very strongly that if they ever so even waved to my daughter again, they would be in the news the next day. We went back to sleep. I let Jamie sleep with me after that incident. She was horrified. The next morning, I found a small drill hole in her closet door. The sick little bastards were spying on my daughter while she slept, at the same time playing with her underwear. Maybe you don't understand the horror of this story unless you're a parent. There are many days where I think I made a mistake not calling the police. I still tell them, but nothing has happened since, and I figure I shouldn't create more trouble now. Jamie's 13 now, and that creep Randy has since gone away to college.
We had just moved into our large new house in Mississauga, Ontario, in an area called Winston Churchill. It was Halloween night, and my parents, my 4 other sisters, my brother and I were unpacking our stuff in our new bedrooms. We had just finished and were talking to each other about leaving our old schools and friends behind. My mother called us to do chores. I was really tired since it was 11:30 at night, way past the trick-or-treating buzz. And we had to do chores now? It seemed to take forever, but when I was done, I decided to go to my bedroom and get some sleep. I heard what sounded like footsteps in the upstairs hallway. Thinking it was my brother or sister, I got up to shout at them for bothering me while I was sleeping, but there, as far as I could tell, there was no one there. I rushed down to the basement where my parents, sister, and brother were considerately working. I asked them all if they had been upstairs, and they replied no. Now I was getting pretty freaked out, but I had to believe it was just my imagination and shrugged it off, as if it had never happened. I went back to my bed, which was now freezing cold. I had to put on a sweater. It was just too cold. I woke up in the middle of the night, around 12:30 a.m., after everyone had gone to sleep. I heard this loud banging sound that seemed to be coming from my parents' bedroom. I thought it might be my brother or sister waiting to get a drink of wine. I stared at the phone. The banging continued, getting louder by the minute. I slipped so I decided to check it. I walked into the hallway, and believe me, there was no one there. As I walked up, the banging seemed to stop. I stared at the door, waiting for a quick moment before deciding to go back to the room. After a couple of minutes, the banging started again. Now I was totally chilled to my very last moment. I tried to sleep again, but I couldn't. Very quickly, the door to my bedroom didn't open, as if someone were pushing it lightly. But it was too dark to see who or what could have caused it. "Hey, What the hell are you doing? Who is it? Can you go back to sleep? At least 7 feet tall. I felt the urge to scream. Nothing came out. I lay there in unimaginable horror as the figure finally said, That was when I screamed at the top of my lungs and covered my eyes, when my parents thrust open the door to my room and flicked on the light. I cried out everything and something figures. My siblings came into the doorway and watched me freak out. I asked my parents if they heard the knocking on their door. Surely they must have. It was their door after all. They said they all told me I was crazy. But I know I'm not. You can't just imagine something. Something so real. I'll never forget this night. I know I won't. It was a few years ago, Halloween night. We were all 20 years old. Right at that age, we're going to haunted house attractions. Is one of the best things to do on Halloween. The attraction was called Scarehouse Journey to the Basement or something. It was only open for 4 straight years in our town. It was never heard of again. This was its 4th and final year of operation. It was a very high quality and surprisingly scary haunted house. One of the best ones I've been to. This was not a tour guided attraction. It was a group exploration attraction. Basically, a maze was the only way out to make your way to a basement. Find the keys, then find the exit and use the key you found to unlock the door. It was a very unique haunted house attraction. It wasn't good. We started out in the living room of the house. To give as much detail as I can about the room, there was a giant open coffin sitting right smack in the middle of the room. There were very convincing spider webs covering just about every inch of every corner of the room. All the furniture was antique and dusty looking, and of course, blood was stained on the creaky floor. We could tell right away this haunted house was going to be great. The next room was the dining room. That was where things got the rooms following the dining room were all very dimly lit by artificial lanterns hooked onto the wall. Several occasions, actors jumped out of them, horrifically convinced the house to be and yet they still got We actually spent a lot of time going in circles trying to find the basement. It wasn't a real wide open house. It was designed to be like a maze, with many rooms and fake doors. It took a long time for us to finally find the basement door, and I have to admit, I was nervous to go down there. It was pitch black. We started to think that it might have been an employees-only area where they kept box. It was just too dark down there to see. It was stated many times that no cell phones were allowed while in the attraction, so we couldn't use cell phone screens as lights. If we wanted to get out of there, we had no choice but to go down. Each step created a creak more painful to the ears than fingernails scratching on a chalkboard. We were all laughing, telling each other how fucking freaked out we were. I had my hands out in front of me as if I was searching for anything that could be dangerous. I banged into somebody and apologized. Who was that? I asked, expecting it to be one of my friends. Whoever I just bumped into placed their hand on my shoulder, and I took off running and screaming while at the same time laughing. There was something so disturbing about experience and process of getting through that maze of a haunted house was much longer than my story makes it out to be, but that's not where things got horrifying. Right outside